So here we are and the system is broke. American dream has gone up in smoke. So stop sitting there all broken hearted. Let's get this motherfucking party started. Lady Liberty is ringing a bell, and we're driving us straight into hell. But don't worry, we got what you need. Crank up the volume till your eardrums bleed. Gonna make America again.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the A Better Way to a podcast. We are your hosts, Jordan and Andrew. I'm Jordan, he's Andrew, and today we are here with a very cool person, Maryam Abolfasli. She is running for the 5th District in the Tennessee. She's running for a seat of Congress, and we
House
reached
of
out to.
Representatives.
It says Maryam for Congress on her website.
I know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Okay.
Tripping
Well, listen,
I'm
all right. Yeah, we'll edit
Just
that.
change
We're
the
gonna
pace
keep
a little
this.
bit.
We're gonna keep this for sure because this is a professional podcast. And we reached out to Maryam because we found her on the internet, as we do find everybody, and found that we agree on a ton of policies and also disagree on some. And imagine that we live in a country where that happens and we can still have a normal conversation about things. But if you want to tell a little bit about yourself, about where you came from, how you got started in this, and what got you interested into going into politics, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm happy to talk with y'all today and finding me on the internet. Well, I'm a native Tennessean. I was born in what was called Baptist Hospital at the time. Now it's South St. Thomas West, where my son was born 38 years later. I am the daughter of 2 small business owners, lived that life for everybody that's lived that life. We all worked in the small business. We all were part of it. And I know that is, I guess, really influential in who I am. They are also first generation immigrants. So they came to Nashville in 78, and I was raised in a big, huge family that was very connected, and values and love and all those things. And then I'm a single mother of a 6-year-old who will likely make an appearance, I'm sure, at some point when his TV show stops. And I love this state. I was 18 at Hume-Fogg High School downtown when I knew really clearly what I wanted to do, which was, I felt like I had some special skill in bridging worlds because I grew up Iranian American in Nashville in the 80s. And I just kind of had that dexterity, right? Of just kind of, all the different ways people think about things, all the different ways people use language to describe things. And I felt like I was some sort of interpreter of those things. And so I wanted to do international relations, and I was clear. And then I went and studied that, and I added economic development because there's a very practical side to me. I'm very kind of nuts and bolts. It'll always be sort of thinking about food, shelter, subsistence, survival, these types of things. And so I added economic development because I was really interested in how countries and communities get out of cycles of poverty. And then I got my big break at the age of 24. I went to Afghanistan, Kabul. For me, that was a big break. So I got to go to Kabul.
Awesome.
Yeah, with the United Nations. I was what they call seconded to the government, which is kind of like on loan to the government of Afghanistan as they were trying to rebuild the irrigation infrastructure there. So again, just getting into that nuts and bolts, like the basics that you need to thrive. And it was one of the most impactful years of my life. I learned a lot about the military and respect for the military and respect for firearms, honestly, because when I was there, it was early days. It was 2003, 2004. So this is right after we kind of kicked out the Taliban. They'd kind of gone under. They weren't gone completely, obviously, but they'd gone under. And it was a bunch of us, kind of early adopter folks that were on the ground. And then there was a lot of, special ops and Marine and Navy and whatever. And a lot of people that were actually working for the private contractor groups. If you remember that whole, those groups that were around, I mean, they still are, and so I just made friends those are the people I hung out with. Those are the people that were around, after a long day. And so I learned a lot from them.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was powerful. And then, of course, about America's role in the world and about post-conflict reconstruction, post-war reconstruction, which was really, really impactful for me. So then the next 10 years I spent working on basically democracy and civil society in the Middle East. I worked for a U.S. nonprofit.
Ooh, nation building.
Right. Exactly. So in Afghanistan, it was very much the, what do you call it? Like sort of the, foundational infrastructural stuff. Right.
Mhm.
And then the next few years was very much dedicated to the soft stuff, right? Democracy. It's like the scaffolding of
Yeah.
rights and freedom.
Mhm.
And civil society. So I had to really turn my gaze to the United States quite a bit to really understand, how do we work? How does this
Yeah.
work here? And then as I'm talking to folks in Tunisia or in Egypt or in Iran or wherever, explaining how that system worked, not to say that they should mimic or exactly duplicate it, but how does it work in the United States? That was the question often.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I think I would be remiss if I didn't just take this opportunity to pause and ask how you feel about, given the work that you did there, how it turned out under the last two administrations.
In Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the departure broke my heart.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
it was bad. We spent too much money and too much time rebuilding that country, giving girls educations and jobs. We
love seeing military interventions end, but we also hate seeing people lose their rights under theocracies.
I wonder, for me, it was and I'm I wasn't there. I don't know what was going on, but I always wondered if there was some low level ability to stay there, a much cheaper version of us staying there just to keep some of those going. Because every time we leave Afghanistan, some power goes in 20 years later to clean it all up again.
Yeah. There's always a vacuum.
Every time. The Soviets were there fighting that war for 20 years. The British were there 20 years before that. It's always like that. And it's like, just some partnership, something where we're there very low level. I think would have been valuable. But anyway,
anything other than what happened at the end.
Yeah. And just like leaving so abruptly. I had Afghan colleagues that were reaching out, begging me to help them get out. I was talking to State Department, trying to figure out how we get these people out that had worked with the American government, or at least, worked with me. It was, And now we see what's happening, right? Like the girls are in major trouble. And it's just, it's a vacuum, and it's a breeding ground for disaster, really. So we should have stayed at some low level if we could. I assume there was a reason we couldn't, but I don't totally buy it, honestly.
I know that sounds shitty, but it actually
with him. It started with him. Yes. And we just, Biden just finished it. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's one thing.
I'm sorry.
That's one thing that you'll realize about us. We are very pro-gun, but we are not fans of pro-gun conservatives for the most part, because of how the whole partisan politics have been hijacked, unfortunately. But we will definitely talk about that at some point.
That's a fun thing to talk about, because that's my whole campaign, basically. Yeah. But so and then I was I want to raise my son here. So I was done being in DC, and I wanted to raise him here. I had the best childhood ever. I guess how I got on this whole thing. And so I came and I started doing, I've been a nonprofit my whole life. I was a director at that point. So this is the part I never really talk about, but I'd done a lot of back end. So financial fundraising, financial projections, internal controls, like all that stuff is part of my career. And then I became the chair of the Metro Human Relations Commission, which is a bunch of commissions that I didn't know about that were set up at the Civil Rights Act in 1964 to make sure that metros were abiding by the Civil Rights Act, essentially, like not discriminating, et cetera. So we were doing that, and that's hard work, and that's work I'm very proud of. And then at the state level, I was the chair of a small little nonprofit started by a bunch of women in their kitchen, which is called Awake Tennessee. And we were just dealing with what the aftermath of the Dobbs decision and trying to figure out what Tennessee was going to do
Can
That is
you just for people that might not be familiar, can you
Yes.
briefly describe that?
Yeah. So Dobbs was the Supreme Court decision that basically nullified Roe v. Wade. Basically said Roe v. Wade doesn't have constitutional standing. So they got rid of it in July of 2022. And when you were in a state like Tennessee, which had what we call a trigger ban, which was a law that was passed years prior with the intention that one day, or some of them say they didn't even think it would ever happen, but maybe they're posturing, and they pass a law. I think they passed it many years before that said, should Roe v. Wade go away, our state will not elect to have abortion care at all. And so the moment Roe v. Wade goes away, that ban comes into effect. That was written and passed many years prior. And now our state is without what essentially is health care, but people don't realize it is, because it's been politicized to such a wild extent that, now we're in a place where women are like, wait, that thing that I got 2 years ago after my miscarriage was an abortion? And it's like, yeah, this is healthcare. And so now we're fighting to just get this back. Anyways, that's not the topic of this podcast, but that's,
we live in the tangent. We thrive and go in all different directions.
We live in the tangent.
Yes.
As humans, we live in the tangent. Yeah.
That should be our motto.
I love it. So then I'm working on that. So I've got people come into my living room, and we're just trying to figure out, like, how are we going to meet with the legislators? What's the ask? What can we do? I mean, literally just basic civic engagement stuff. Just trying to put it together, meeting with legislators, trying to understand how they work, seeing how some of our coalition partners are getting close to, or some of the folks in the space are getting close to an exception bill. And then boom, a lobby group comes in and says, nope, you are not going to do this. And they say it publicly in committee, and the thing drops. And that was like a real learning for me. I was like, okay. So a bill sponsor on the right says he's pushing this. And then this group, Right to Life, comes into a committee meeting and says, under no circumstances can you pass this, and it's gone. And all this work that all these people have done. And so then in the wake of that, the Covenant shooting happens. And I'm like, no, we're doing a rally right now. I've been watching mass shootings like all of us for years and years and years, just totally fed up with it. Now I have a 6-year-old. It's at a school just down the street. All the mom groups across Middle Tennessee are just imploding, their chat groups and everything. And I was like, no, we got to have a rally. So I just, in 3 days, just spent nonstop time trying to get this rally going. And I thought, 500 folks would show up, and it turned out to be in the thousands. We get together, we're grieving together, we're crying together, we're singing together. Students come in mass, they got in touch with me. I was like, do not get expelled for this. They got their schools just decided, okay, y'all all can go to this thing.
That's
Churches
awesome.
are coming in the bus loads. Women are coming up to me, and they're like, I have never done this before in my life. I am not this, whatever this is, but I'm here because I can. I mean, obviously Covenant had a lot of conservative people that went there, and so this was an activation for them, as we know. And so a movement was started, the Tennessee 3 Take to the Well, that same day. And I started this organization, Rise and Shine Tennessee. So this is the long story. And then I spend, 50, 60 days at the legislature, 12-hour days, many of them. I'm in committees about criminal justice. I'm in committees about reproductive freedom. I'm in committees about things affecting kids, about lunches, about vouchers. I testified twice against vouchers. So we're doing all the things because we see it as all very intersectional. The gun stuff kind of slipped in at the very end and barely, it wasn't anything the whole session because they kind of knew everybody was there for that. And then they slip it in at the very end, and they arm teachers, and then session's over. Yeah. And so then I decided to run. And that's the story. And then the campaign's a whole nother story. But yeah, that's me in a small nutshell.
That's the journey from
senior year to now.
Career at the UN to activist to hopefully politician.
Yeah.
Who are you? Sorry, go ahead, Jordan.
No. That's your question's more relevant here.
Who are you running against? Because I don't know. I know it's a national election, but I'm not. I'm from Texas, not Tennessee, so I don't know the guy.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. So there's a guy named Andy Ogles. He is now considered kind of the Santos of the South. the reason for that,
Oh,
In a good way or in a bad way?
no.
I don't know what the good way would be, but yeah, the bad way.
I think some people. I don't know.
I don't know.
San-
The humorous
Santos
career
is
he's-
I think he's becoming a queer icon.
yeah, yeah.
I think that he's gonna
Yeah,
take.
that's what I
I
was
think
gonna
he's on
say,
the road to take it back.
Yeah, so the post indictment career is booming for him.
Yeah. Well,
No,
JD
so-
Vance almost became a queer icon once his drag photos dropped.
Well, he's a young guy, so you
Yeah,
know,
there's
we'll
still
see.
time.
We'll see.
There's still time. We'll see.
You guys funny. So he so basically this guy, he's like born and raised around here, Franklin, I think, and he's the county mayor in one of the counties. We haven't even talked about the map, so we'll talk about that. But he basically lies. So he lies that he's an economist, and then he's not an economist, and then he lies that he graduated with this, that, or the other degree, and then people go into his records and they find, oh no, he didn't graduate with that, and he actually dropped out, and then he got back on, and then he finished with this kind of this generalist degree, and then he does like a GoFundMe for a burial for a child that he lost, miscarriage or something. Raised $25,000. Doesn't know, nobody knows what happened to that money. There's no burial. Then
That's
so it
weird.
grows and it grows and it grows.
Mm.
Yeah, super pathological. And so then we learn in the midst of this campaign that the 300,000 that go away. He's using this podcast to do this. Okay, on it. Go.
He
Don't bother
knows
me again.
everybody's
Go
gonna
get a
see.
popsicle and close the door and never come back.
Just FYI, we are recording video, but we'll blur out his face if you don't want it on the
It's
on the YouTube.
Anybody who knows that I'm a single mother running for office knows that he's a big part of it. So
All right, there
thank
you
you.
That's awesome.
So he then, okay, here's the thing that I learned running for office. It matters to certain people. It's a signaler how much money you raise, right? And so my reading of Andy Ogel's moves in this is that in 2022, he's running. It's a very crowded primary on the Republican side. He hasn't raised a ton of money, I think 100 or something thousand. He says he's giving himself a loan of $300,000. So that boosts him up to whatever, 400,000.
Wait. Giving himself a loan from what?
You can, on your FEC filings, you can say, I'm giving myself a personal loan. I'm giving my campaign a loan. I'm a rich person.
Okay, I understand. So his money,
I'm a wealthy
to the
person.
campaign.
and
Okay.
I'm going to sell off one of my properties.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
give
I
myself
get it.
whatever wealthy people do. So you can do that, and that now makes your total raise look quite better, right? And so that makes him look really good, and he ends up winning through that primary and whatnot. Not the only reason, but that was a good one, right? It attracts donor money. Oh, he's the viable candidate. The viability of his race, that's something they love to use, right? And then this year, 2 years later, as this new election is kind of getting going, he goes in and amends it and says, never mind, no, it was just $20,000. Yeah.
Okay.
In the
and
interest
then,
of honesty and transparency, I want to tell you that I lied to you.
And then turns out it was never a loan, never transferred, no withdrawal, no deposit. And then there's been about 9 amendments since. And what, I can't keep up with all that, but one of them, you're supposed to put all your assets and your debts and everything, your credit, everything on these filings. And he says, oh yes, sorry, I have like a house that's like from $500,000 to $1 million worth. Forgot to put that on there.
That's a big range.
Mm-hmm. And to forget,
Yeah, to forget that also.
And
I
so
forgot
then,
about my house.
and then we find out, day after his primary, and he had a really tough primary this year, that the FBI has confiscated his phone. And so
What's on the phone?
went to some of those Diddy parties.
I mean, I don't.
We can only speculate.
We can only speculate.
But given that it's a conservative,
well, he's not in movie and film. He's not in film and music though.
Yeah, but like how many?
Well, we're gonna have to check his Twitter to see how many times he's disparaged trans people and called them pedophiles.
Yeah,
because usually there's
a
pretty direct correlation.
If he's out in public calling trans people pedophiles, I guarantee you there's CSAM on that phone.
Yeah, look at his hard drives.
Oh my God.
100%.
Anyway,
so
you don't have to comment on that. You don't have to comment on that.
I'm no comment. Love it. But no. So the big thing is that there's something else going on that we don't know about. because that's not
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
about the $300,000 loan, you know? And so he's on his way, I'm guessing, to get kicked out eventually and maybe get an indictment or whatever. But so those are the headlines, right? That's what sucks about the guy in national news. Let me tell you what sucks about him at the District 5 level.
Policies. Yeah, let's hear it.
Well, or the lack thereof.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'll just say he used taxpayer money to do these flyers at the beginning of his primary, which said he brought 100 bills in his 2 years. It was historical. He's the highest. That's the highest number that any freshman's ever brought. Not one, my friends, saw the light of the day. Did not come to the House floor. They were entitled things like "Go Woke or Go Broke," "Stop the Invasion," "Liberty and Laundry Appliances Act." He tried to.
I think I know this guy. I think
he tried to impeach. He tried to impeach Kamala. He was the guy who brought the no gag order for Trump when he was in New York. That's this guy. Now, okay, that's all awful, whatever. The worst part that I have learned having been on this campaign, I mean, this is a huge or bigger conversation, but he is nowhere and people can feel it. I have people that know him from his party that are so frustrated at how this man does not return phone calls, he does not even consider himself representing, as far as I'm concerned, District 5. We have a whole series that's kind of silly on our social media. It's called Where's Andy? Where we go into the district and we're like, have you seen Andy Ogles? And everyone's like, who is that? You know, and
that's awesome.
I campaign 12 to 16 hours a day. Sometimes my district, I wanted to show you all, it'll be hard for you to see this. My district was redistricted. So can you see how wild that is, right?
Yeah. No, you should see some of the districts here in San Antonio. It's pretty nuts.
It was for 100 years, forever. Since Andrew Jackson, it was just Davidson County. So it was just a circle.
Yeah.
Since 1950s, it's just been, and it's had one city and one city mayor, whatever. And then they added 6 counties to it: rural, suburban, and urban. And so sometimes if I start in, the north of the county, north of the district one day and for one meeting, and then I have a night meeting in the south of the district, it'll be a 12, 16 hour day with like 2 or 3 hours of driving. And I was just like, if this guy had to do anywhere near this level of campaigning, he'd be out. It's too much.
Yeah.
Too much work. But so what's really frustrating to me is that District 5 is growing we're growing really well throughout the district. It's a very vast and different district: rural, suburban, urban. Nashville, I got cattle farmers talking to me. Everything. We have immense needs for dealing with economic growth, really fast economic growth. We have a river that is the 3rd most endangered body of river in the whole country that needs wastewater management, all this stuff. All this is what our federal reps should basically be doing, bringing that federal money down and figuring out how, none of it. They don't see him. They don't hear from him. Nothing. I go in and meet with Republican lawmakers and mayors all the time because I enjoy it. And I ask them, what do you need at a federal level? And they're like, it hasn't even occurred to me that I can ask.
Well, because that's the culture in mainstream conservatism now is every state is an island and we don't need the federal government. Federal government's woke, we don't. Yeah, but
which is really weird because the tune was significantly different 4 years ago.
Yeah. But. Yeah, and I'm sure it would flip if after the coronation of God King Trump, I'm sure they'd be asking for all kinds of federal money, but yeah, but that's just the culture right now is that they don't want federal money. Ron DeSantis doesn't want federal money,
Well, someone asked me this, at a meet and greet yesterday, what does he see as the purpose of government if he doesn't want to pass bills and he doesn't want to bring federal funding down and he doesn't want to meet with constituents, what? And I've been trying to think about this a lot, and I was listening to, I listened to as much as I can about what's going on in the right, and there, this movement of the new right that's happening right now, and basically the idea, I think Project 2025 encapsulates a lot of it, but it's about using government as a tool for virtue, like morality,
Yeah.
versus
Oh yeah, that's been a big thing.
versus like, policy making and solving sort of the challenges of the people of a place. It's more just kind of like, let's make sure everybody is moral in this ideology that we have.
Right.
And so I think, and to stop government, I think he sees his job as like stopping government, halting it, obstructing it. And if he's part of this new right movement,
Right.
which is, I think that's a fight that's going on right
And
now.
like obstructing the government is sometimes important. When
Sure.
when the government is acting in bad faith and trying to trample rights, standing in the way is super important. And sometimes that is a representative's job. But when we're talking about, like environmental cleanup, which takes a lot of money, takes a lot of resources, takes a lot of organization, something that, maybe counties or even a state isn't really well equipped to do. Sometimes, getting involved with the federal government makes a lot of sense.
Like for us who just had, our towns in East Tennessee just got completely wiped off the map with the floods.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm not a wonderful, but like what a perfect example of what we're talking about.
So we got about 33 million for about 100 households or less. And it's tragic. I mean, these are poor communities to start with. And the coordination was great. And of course, the misinformation has been horrific.
Oh my God.
Oh, we've done a whole.
I know.
Yeah, we've done a whole information boosting type effort to try to combat some of that misinformation. It's interesting. Like, just to tangent for a second, like I work in emergency services, so I kind of have an idea of like what happens after an emergency, and just the perspectives from people on the ground are not, without merit, but people have to realize that it's a perspective and it's not the full picture. And in order to really understand what's happening, you have to know the full picture. And so many of these people's rumors are just going off the wall based on this, like a person they talked to or a thing they saw for 6 seconds. And most of politics is like that nowadays, unfortunately. But
it's okay to be upset and scared and tell people what you saw and be wrong. That's not a crime. But then you've got these like bot accounts that latch onto misinformation and amplify it. And that's where the problem really begins.
Yeah, it definitely felt foreign and intentional and messy. I will say, but that point you brought up, Jordan, about, it's not that it's wrong or that I feel like that's been something I've really learned a lot about on this campaign is, so I'm in this tough district, right? It's geared for me to lose 100%. We haven't talked about that yet, and so I am interested in talking to everybody, right? I'm interested in representation of all 500,000 plus voters. I'm interested in bridging all these divides. I'm up for that job. I enjoy that. There are plenty of people that are not, and they should not. And I'm not saying anyone should put themselves in harm's way or anything like that. But that's something I'm sort of committed to in general in my life, right? And sort of have been geared to do. And so I do a lot of conversations with folks, obviously from across the aisle, but also very different perspectives. And one of the things I've really learned, so I door knock a ton. I'm like the only congressional candidate on earth that door knocks. So I go door knock every Sunday.
That's how,
what is it?
Cortez. Ran her campaign.
So
just knocking on doors.
Knocking on doors.
Walking from house to house and like talking to people.
Like, hi, I'm Maryam, whatever. I will be doing that today at 3:00. Anyways, so as I've talked to voters, one of the things that's been so helpful is like, when you're in your own bubble, let's say I'm in my bubble. Everything you hear, every idea that sounds really far from yours and seems kind of irrational or wild, you're just like, this is just media. This is just, wild, crazy stuff. But then when I talk to voters and they're like, yeah, maybe the actual idea is kind of wild, but the logic behind it comes from somewhere. And that's been really helpful to like connect with people. And you're like, okay, all immigrants are awful and everyone needs to be deported. Okay, I get that. But can we talk about why you feel that way or where are you getting? And then they'll tell me a story or an instance or an experience that actually was true to them and has some logic behind it. And it's like, oh, okay, so this isn't just you parroting necessarily something you saw online. I'm sure what you see online kind of like amplifies it.
Right.
But you actually have a sentiment or logic about it that's informative and helpful for me to understand, and may have some truth to it too. I mean,
Yeah.
and then from there, I start to really look into it and be like, okay, well, I heard this. Is this true? What should we do about it? And I think that's been the case throughout this whole campaign, is like, it's so easy for us to just be like, that's nuts. Forget that crazy, and then it's like, well, actually, this is coming from this. And I didn't really realize that there was that going on. I'll just be honest.
Yeah, no. And that's, honesty is, I wish more people were honest, because I don't think calling somebody ignorant should be a bad thing. It just means somebody hasn't learned something yet. And that's something that we talk about constantly. Being ignorant to somebody's perspective just means you haven't listened to it yet. It doesn't mean that you're an idiot. It doesn't mean that like
it's such a negative connotation.
Yeah,
though.
it
Like,
really is.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
But it's something that people need to do in order to truly grasp the full picture when it comes to the issues. There are so many of these like gotcha identity politics taglines that are meant to rile people up.
And we're so geared to respond like defensively and put up the wall,
But they're based on a sliver of truth that they can't be called a lie, but that sliver of truth is taken so far out of context that you really have to want to know where that comes from and do the research yourself in order to figure out, which most people frankly just don't have time for or don't want to do, because it's uncomfortable to find out that you're wrong. It's uncomfortable to find out that you might not know everything. And people prefer to just stay in their little dugouts and hurl insults across the field.
Yeah.
But
and we're included. Everyone's included in that, and it's been really, I've grown a lot learning where a lot of these perspectives on the other side are coming from. And they've helped me figure out, especially when it comes to policy,
right,
how to do policy. Like when we talk about economics or something like that, or even gun rights, you know?
Well, I did. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, go ahead.
No, I did want to bring that up because obviously we are a gun rights podcast, and something that I've noticed has really taken the place of the term common sense gun control. We've seen a lot of politicians start saying that they are for gun safety, and I saw that on your page as well. I saw that on your Instagram. That was one of the whole reasons I reached out, because I think that there is a bit of a, like, gun owners feel that politicians are a bit disingenuous when they say things like that, when they say common sense gun control, because common sense that term is engineered to make people feel that if anyone is against what they're saying, they lack common sense. And then saying something like gun safety is, I don't know if it's engineered that way, but I think many gun owners feel that if they oppose those policies, that they are then put in a group of people that are supposedly against gun safety. Yeah, and it's when we see things like that, and I saw the things that you were proposing, I noticed that when people say they are for gun safety, the only thing that really seems to be having anything to do with gun safety are things like mandatory gun safety laws. And I wanted to know why it only seems to translate to more laws and not things like more education in schools towards firearms, tax incentives for safe storage like they do in Virginia, community violence intervention programs, and things like root cause mitigation. Why is that we focus on the legal side of things and not the community side of things?
Okay, so a couple of things on that, and I'll probably come at it from a couple different areas. One, I have said on several interviews after doing this for about a year and a half, right? Really, really going on the gun awareness on my own part for a year and a half and reading everything, it's really responsible gun owners aren't the problem. That's kind of like, I've said that over and over. Responsible gun owners aren't the problem. We've had, from what I understand, there are just generations and generations of gun owners in this state. And we didn't have these problems. We just didn't to this level. And they raised their kids understanding responsible gun ownership, and they have not been and are not the problem. I think is the problem is irresponsible gun ownership. And I'm open to interrogating that a little bit with y'all. And I appreciate that. So now, yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's a fair point that under that part in my website, it just says like 2 laws, like background checks and safe storage, when in actuality, when I was faced with this, I looked at it way bigger. And there's a huge, long, boring post I did video on my page, on my campaign page, about what I would do more holistically. But I get that, I mean, obviously that doesn't convey when you're just like, these are the 2 things I want to do in Congress, right?
Right. Yeah.
But, so what happened was, at the beginning of summer, in my kid's playground, not when he was there, but there was a shooting and a 15-year-old shot a 13-year-old. And I went into this and we did a vigil and we did all the things. We got to know the family. We did a GoFundMe, now, all the awful things you have to do around gun violence.
Yeah.
And I really now that I was running for federal office, I was like, well, what do I want to do about this? And as I delved in, it got more and more complicated, like really complicated. As I talked to some lawmakers about this school that's nearby, that would be the high school that my kid goes to, brand new state-of-the-art school, lots of kids. The 2 mental health counselors there are busting at the seams with a lot of challenges, a lot of mental health challenges. So, and they have 2, so they're not under resourced by any kind of measure. And then, there is an element of poverty and an element of just, not having enough and parents having to work really hard to make enough. There's an element of just, violence in general, violence begetting violence, among the kids. But mostly it was like this mental health component, this poverty component, and that was beyond sort of, and then the stolen gun component. We have a huge,
Right,
I'm sure, like y'all, we have this huge thing that's every year guns are being stolen out of cars higher than the year before, and it's out of control right
That's
now.
all over. That's one of the primary drivers of the stolen, the black market for guns.
Yes.
And I will admit too that a long time ago I kept a gun in my car and it got stolen right out of my front yard.
Oh wow.
So it's just,
well, we
it's
didn't,
one of those things.
in Tennessee, you weren't allowed to have a gun in your car until 2013.
Yeah.
So anyway, so those are the 3 elements, right? And so I started to be like, okay, great, fine. You could do safe storage in cars. In all honesty, that seems like a really hard ask. People just want their guns in their glove compartments. I'd love to hear what y'all think about that. But then I started looking at like the other parts of this, right? And so I looked at the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act that was passed in 2021 at the federal level. And there's no gun restriction laws really in that, but there's a ton of money for everything around gun violence. And one of the things was mental health. So there's money for schools to get mental health counselors, and there's money for mental health community centers. And that's what I felt like was the big takeaway for me on that shooting, was how much pre and post, because after a freaking trauma like this, I mean, the family's freaking devastated. All the kids, all the siblings were there. All their buddies were there. It's just, you just created generations of hell,
Yeah.
And then nobody has money for a $200 therapy session, much less 20 of them or 2 years of them or 3 years of them. And so you've got these adverse childhood experiences that are just, going on top of one another, that are just creating an atmosphere for more violence and more criminal.
For people that are unfamiliar, adverse childhood experiences is a technical term used in psychology. That's not just like a thing she said.
I'm not making this up. Yeah.
That is a real metric by which, we judge the likely outcomes of, like say substance abuse or violence in adults.
Right. Like how your life, the outcomes in your life are very much determined, can be very much determined, not totally and not causally.
Yeah. Just probabilistically.
Yes, exactly. By how many ACEs you have and how many, the alternative is positive experiences. And so if you have a lot of those, they can counter it. And we all have both, right? But if you stack one upon the other, it can end up being really dangerous for you and your communities. So some of these communities are just affected by a ton of those. And so just really looking at that. So So yeah, I mean, fair enough. I should put all that on my website too.
Yeah, but that's tough.
I don't-
That's a tough sell, right?
yeah.
Because like, someone's asking you, especially somebody who doesn't know a lot about guns and is generally anti-gun, which is a lot of what we're up against in this kind of like cultural battle. Somebody who is sort of like low information, but very, very scared of guns.
High energy.
And high energy. You start talking about all this stuff that's peripheral to gun violence, you kind of lose them because this doesn't seem like a quick, easy solution that they want.
And it's super boring. You know what I realized the other day? I was watching one of the debates. I think it was Trump and Kamala, and I realized one of the big things is that, but it's just that policy is actually pretty boring.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And really, and I don't,
especially if you're trying to remedy like deep cultural issues,
complex issues. And so really, if you're like, so how would you address this horrible thing that we're all dealing with, which is like the economy or gun violence? And it's like, well, there would be a 72-point, agenda that I have. And it's just like, you're going to lose everybody. So it's just easier to be like, it's immigrants or whatever, and just call it a day. And I mean, not to be condescending in any way, but I start to understand, when you're a policy nerd like me, and I love this stuff, and I really think in very nuanced ways about it. It's just really hard to convey. But I did do a video on it, and it should be put on the web. I talk about it all the time. I talk about it all the time in terms of just federal funding that we're not using, but I should talk about it in terms. So anyways, mental health is a component. Just what are those ACEs and what are those early like childhood, whatever, how are we taking care of our people so that everybody's okay? And so that the determinants of violence are not there. And then how are we dealing with the guns in general? And so how do we deal with this stolen gun thing? I'm open to whatever y'all. I mean, my car has gotten rummaged through 3 times in 8 months. While it was in there, they didn't take it. They don't care. They just want a gun.
Hey folks, you know what blows? Buying stuff for your gun or your gear on the internet only to get it home and realize it sucks. Wouldn't it be great to take the guesswork out of buying stuff like that so you knew what you were getting was quality stuff? I'm so glad you asked, because that brings us to one of our sponsors, Panther City Tactical. Panther City Tactical carries AR parts and tactical gear, and only their favorite stuff that they personally use and love. Think brands like Bravo Company, Emissary Development, B5 Systems, S-Tac pouches, and more. I actually got the weapon light for my pistol from them, and it shipped super quick, and because it was over $129, I got free shipping. They also throw in candy and stickers with every order, and being a slut for stickers myself, I thought that was pretty cool. On top of that, Zach the owner is a great dude with great values, and we wouldn't advertise anybody on the show that we wouldn't vouch for ourselves. So check out Panther City Tactical and use code ABETTERWAY, all one word, for 10% off your first order. Once again, that is code ABETTERWAY, all one word, for 10% off your first order. Check them out.
So I will say that you should never leave a gun in your car. It's okay to have, I carry a gun. I have a gun in my car. There are definitely times on me. Yeah. And there have definitely been times where I'm carrying a gun because I'm out and about all day. I'm with my family and I don't, I want to be able to protect them. And then I'll come to a place that says, you can't bring your gun in here.
Right. What do you do?
Well, if you're following the law, you have to put it in your glove box or put it in a safe in your car and lock it up. Do
you have a law for that in Texas? A safe storage in the car?
We have a law that says that you cannot leave a gun where a minor can have access to it. And if a minor does get access to it and commits a crime with it, there's liability.
We don't have that.
But we don't have a law that like dictates how you have to lock it up. Just that, you can't leave it where a minor can get it. And so theoretically, say when I had my gun stolen, I was a much younger guy. I was out of town at the time. I failed to tell my wife the gun was in the glove box, and somebody broke into the car, like hopped my fence, broke into the car, took the gun out. The fact that they trespassed and got into a car that wasn't theirs, that satisfies that law. Right. So, it's not as strict as you might think, but from hearing just that like, I think even if you leave your car unlocked, the fact that like a stranger's not supposed to be in your car doesn't necessarily imply that you're leaving it like. So what this would apply to is like if you leave your safe open and your son comes in and picks your gun because you don't, you didn't lock anything up. It doesn't really apply to people stealing stuff.
Yes, that's
Okay.
like one of those laws that sounds effective
Right.
at face value, but is really not.
But really, when you think about it, though, it's kind of tough to decide like how to punish people for leaving their guns in their car when you're in an environment where sometimes you have to like be psychic and know exactly where you're going like beforehand and what their policy is on guns, right? Like, because you can't tell someone, you can't leave your gun in your car and then tell someone, no, you can't bring your gun in here, and then like what are they supposed to do?
Do you think safe storage in the car is a viable option as a gun owner?
Do you mean like requiring that people keep it locked?
Yeah, like
Right, so-
for that situation.
I think safe
Not when
storage
I guess
is-
not when you're in it, but maybe when you
No.
leave it.
I think safe storage is a great idea. I think that you should lock your gun. If you have to leave it, you should never leave your gun in your car. If you have to leave your gun in your car, you should lock it.
Yeah.
And if you lock it
Yeah.
up, it should be in something that is
Yeah.
stronger than your glove
Mhm.
box.
But
But the
I
problem
think it's
is
tough to say like how do you punish someone who doesn't do that? Like, first of all, how do you catch someone who isn't doing that?
Right.
Second of all, how would you punish
Yeah.
them? And the conclusion that I always come to with this, like any of these laws that are punitive, is that typically what's going to happen is it's going to be minorities getting harassed by cops that are going to catch these charges, not people like me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like ERPOs too.
Right.
So how does let's think through how. Sorry, I just said so we say okay, you have to have safe storage. You got a good safe. You're just when you're out of your car and you need to leave it in there, it's got to be. And then so and so breaks in and like breaks your safe and gets it.
Yeah.
And
That's
then
what I'm
your
saying.
gun-
Even a safe, like if you have a metal safe that's like cable tied to your seat,
Some of
they
these
could have
are
bolt
only-
cutters. They
They're
could
only-
have a
yeah.
crowbar. So
Yeah.
the really, to me, what I come to is that carrying a gun is not something that should be punished. If you're qualified to carry a gun, you should be able to carry your gun. Obviously,
So then
there's,
let's
like,
talk about
sensitive
that
places.
part. The qualifying to carry it. Where are you on that?
Yeah,
Well-
that's one of those issues that is like, at least for me, I'm a Second Amendment absolutist, but I understand that it is something that has a high probability for lethality, and that they're for somebody who is not familiar with firearms, it makes total sense to me why they would think
Right.
that you need to go through
Training
A through Z
and education.
versions of
Yeah,
training.
Yeah. And you
The-
should
the-
get as much training and education
Yeah.
as you can.
The
but
problem is that when we run into this, we inevitably get to and I hate this argument because I feel
No,
like it's so played out and
it
it
always-
loses people. We inevitably
but it
get to
always
the
comes to this.
constitutional argument where it is
Oh,
like,
no.
no,
I know
that
what you mean.
yeah,
I know what
see,
you mean.
that's what happens when you interrupt, Andrew. We inevitably get to the constitutional argument where it's like it's such a silly argument to make. Like, I don't think the Constitution gives us rights. I don't believe that. I think it makes it much harder for the government to pass laws arbitrarily to remove rights from people. But we get to this point where somebody is going to make the case that this amount of training is not is too much in order to exercise a right. And then you have states' rights versus federal rights. It's a very complicated situation. And what I really think is the biggest issue here is the fact that both sides don't trust each other. So when we start to go down this road, each side is already trying to figure out the other side's final chess move. And for gun owners, a lot of what we see is this war of attrition, because in our heads, our beliefs are that based on crime statistics, based on gun laws that have passed in previously, we don't see the desired outcomes happening based on the laws being proposed. And then what we see end up happening is more gun laws being proposed in the future that then further restrict that right, because the laws that were passed initially are emotional, they're hastily passed, they're not done so in a
They
way
didn't
that
target the root causes.
they didn't target
And
the
so
root
it's like,
causes.
please, bro, just one more law, and then we'll
so
solve
much,
it.
Yeah, and so much of what you just said from when you witnessed in the presidential debate, policy propositions that these candidates have are so superficial because nobody wants to hear about your 72 bullet points. But what it ends up doing is further polarizing both sides because they think, oh, it's just that easy. We can just pass this law and it's going to fix the problem. Why don't we just do that? Because nobody wants to say, yeah, we have to look at, why white men over the age of 40 are the most popular demographic to kill themselves with their firearm. That's something that, like, if we can get rid of firearm suicides, half of the gun deaths would go away, over half. But it's not as sexy as talking about school shootings, unfortunately, which is also something we have to work on.
Yeah.
Heard.
And for me,
okay, I get it.
For me, it's a lot more practical than that. We're talking about the issue of, like, how much education or training do you need before you can carry a gun?
I'm sorry, I went on a tangent.
No, you're fine. Anytime you're adding a requirement to the exercise of a right, or let's say, like, forget about the rights, forget about the Constitution, forget about rights. If you have training and education requirements before you do something, there is a financial obligation tied to that, right? So if I have to get 8 hours of training to be able to carry a handgun, I have to find an 8-hour block of time that I'm not working my job, and then I have to pay somebody to get that training. I have to pay for somebody to take care of my kids. I have to do the paperwork. I have to handle the paperwork. Which means I have to know how to do that. And all of these things, you can boil it down to economics. You can boil it down to, like, how like economically burdensome is that? And what that means is that there will be people who are too poor to do that thing, who cannot take off work, cannot get their kids taken care of, can't afford the $250 for a training class. And if you feel like not everybody should be able to do that thing, that might not bother you, but I believe everybody should have access to the tools they need to protect themselves and their family. And so it doesn't sit well with me when people say, that, and they don't know that they're saying it always. This isn't like, I don't believe that everybody who supports this is, like, classist or whatever, but essentially what it means is that they're asking for, a certain section of like economically disadvantaged people to just not be able to do this.
Okay.
And that's where I'm at.
Yeah, sure. And any policy that does that. Yeah, for sure. So here's my thing then. I have a million questions, and obviously we're not going to have time for all of them. I have so many for you. Like, it
sorry,
was very
I went on a rant, and Andrew had a very short, practical thing. I should have just let him speak.
All of it was really helpful. So just as a policymaker, I'd be curious on your thoughts on a lot of other things. So here's the first thing that comes to mind is, you said, like, I don't remember what word you used, Andrew, but you said, like, a person that is equipped or something to have a gun should just have one wherever they're going, And then I was like, well, what does it mean to be equipped or whatever the
qualified?
Word was? Qualified, yeah. And so I think about a friend who was assaulted and afterwards decided to carry just a little, like, I don't know what you call them, little pistol in her purse, right?
Yeah.
And she said that the training at that point we still had permit carry. Now we have permitless carry in Tennessee. We got permitless carry in 2018, I believe. And so to get a permit to get a gun, you had to do those 8 hours that you're talking about. And she was like, it was really helpful for me. Right. So she's someone who's kind of reacting to her fear level, which is much higher than it was before. And she's like, I just need this. But she might voluntarily choose a class or whatever, but the state required her to. And she was like, I'm so glad I know X, Y, and Z. Right.
Yeah.
And then we have this other case. I don't know how many there are, so I'm not going to act like it's a huge deal, but, like, you hear these stories in Tennessee where, like, dude had his gun on his hip, holstered incorrectly, hit that artery that you hit, and he's out, right? And apparently the training teaches you that, like, holstering is really important.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
about. You can hit that artery and you're going to die.
The femoral artery, especially if you're appendix carrying, if you don't have it in a holster, you can definitely shoot. It happens a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I don't guess it happens a lot, but it does happen.
Right. But I read it in the news. I'm like, these are just basic things. And, like, you guys, whatever you approach challenges in one way. Some people approach challenges another way, and they don't equip themselves with the knowledge, and they don't. I mean, the thing that terrifies me about gun, and yes, you're right. Like we know the data shows if you didn't grow up around a gun, you're freaked out by one. If you did grow up around a gun, you feel better with one, right? That's like physiologically, that's
Yeah,
just how
yeah.
It makes sense. Same thing with tigers.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So like, and the data is really cool. Like they'll show like a heartbeat of a person that grew up with a gun go down when the gun's in the room.
Yeah.
And they'll show a person that didn't grow up with a gun go up when the gun's
Yeah.
in the room. You know, it just is what it is. So, and you can work at that in both ways. But so when I think about these people, like what freaks me out. I mean, I have so many questions about why y'all think guns are so much more available and why do we have so many mass shootings? And I think you probably got good answers for all that. But so the thing that freaks me out are these accidental shootings with kids. We have a lot of those in Tennessee.
Yes.
Again, a lot, but probably just like a handful, you know. Then like we had one 2 weeks ago where the grandma put hers out on the counter,
Mhm.
on the kitchen counter. I think because they are a part of people's lives,
Right.
right? And then the kid comes in, the 8-year-old, and I think that even seeing my son, I just think when I say gun responsibility, and I think most people do train themselves and hopefully their family members, but the immense deference that this lethal machine requires, like the immense just respect that this thing, and like when I'm talking to my kid and he's like, "You're dead," or "I'm going to shoot you," you know, and I'm like, dude, death is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like it's a really big deal. And my feeling, and it's just a feeling, is that death has stopped mattering in the same way that it did. Now, this is not a gun control problem, obviously, or gun rights or gun whatever.
Well, but that's
it is
related.
a feeling,
That's
you know,
related
yeah,
to the
it's like,
problem of violence and the kind of cultural nihilism that we're facing.
yes. And so this machine, I call it a machine, I don't know, tool, whatever.
Yeah,
Sure.
It's a machine or a tool.
We're not going to make fun of you for the words you use.
Yeah.
Grants that. And to me, there's nothing higher than that. To take another person's life, I don't think as a human there's anything bigger that we can do, right? Like in terms of
take a bunch all at once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More lives. Right. And so to me, like the gun should be, I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's the ultimate thing.
We should
No,
have
I get
significantly
it.
more
I get
respect for it than
Yeah.
people do.
So it's a tool that is designed to kill people, and you know, you'll get people on both sides arguing one way or the other about this. It is a tool. It doesn't have any morality built into it,
Right.
But it is designed to put holes in things, and we made it not just to shoot paper. We made it to shoot people. You know, and that's why I want it. You know, that's why it's a useful tool. But because of that, it does, like you say, it demands a certain kind of respect. And obviously, like you can kill people with all kinds of stuff. You know, in Europe, you hear about people plowing rented vans through crowds that were not properly controlled. You know, or not. I don't mean the crowds were not properly controlled, but like, you know, it's like if you don't have like, you know, concrete pylons
Bollards and
where to keep vehicles out.
Yeah.
You can have somebody plan to do a massacre with a van. I think the latest one that happened, like 60 people died. So, I mean, you can choose a lot of different tools to kill people if you want to kill people, especially if we're talking about mass shootings or mass killings, I'll say. But here in America, the tools that are available are guns. You know, people don't have to rent a van and plan it out to do it. They can get a gun and do it more easily.
Yeah.
But is that, you know, is that a moral failing of the gun or is that just because that's what's here? You know, you could say like, if there were no guns in households in America, no children would ever shoot themselves. That's true. If there were no pools in house and in yards in America, no children would ever fall into a pool and drown. You know, would you put a parent in prison, do you think, because they didn't put a fence around their pool and their kid fell in and they weren't around to save them? Some people might. I don't know. You know, there's a lot of kind of like different kind of things to consider, but I think that you should teach your kids to swim. I think that you should keep your kids away from you know, open bodies of water. I think if you have a pool, you need to have a plan, you know, for monitoring it, for keeping your kids out of it. I think it's the same with guns. I think that you should not leave your gun on a table if you have kids running around. Even if your kid knows about guns and you've educated them, which I think you should, you shouldn't just leave a loaded gun on the table. But
I think that's the question, though, is like, where does the legislation come
right?
into
But that's what I'm
play?
saying is like I don't know that there's like a legal approach to that. I think that if you're talking about, I don't believe in like punitive approaches to this. I think that like when a parent's child has accidentally shot themselves with their gun, they're living in hell already. I don't know
Yeah.
that adding a financial penalty to that is gonna help. And I don't
Be
think
preventative.
that I don't think that any parent is gonna say, you know what, I was gonna
Mhm.
leave my gun out, but if my kid shoots himself and dies with it, I'm gonna have to pay $500 to the state, so I'm not gonna do that. I think probably
Or even spend life in
yeah,
prison.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
if,
I
if
think
the threat of
probably
your
what
kid,
they're going to be worried about, if they're worried about anything, is their kid shooting himself.
So can you talk me through the Georgia? Can we do that? I don't know if that might be insensitive.
No, go ahead.
The Georgia, the dad. I think it was Georgia. The recent one.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Mhm.
relevant.
The guy.
I mean,
the guy that
obviously-
he gave his kid. He had some indication that his kid was unstable. Gave his kid an AR-15.
Yeah.
Which, like, you know, I don't even know.
That's very different from leaving
Exactly.
a gun out with
Yeah,
no
yeah.
signs. Like I think
So
people
what
are
do you
not
do
going to.
there?
I think he's criminally liable.
I think he's
personally.
criminally
Okay.
liable. Yeah.
Because
Okay,
that is
that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, no,
I think he's
personally,
certainly
that's
morally liable, and under the laws
Yes.
in Georgia, I think he's criminally liable.
Yeah, I
Okay.
in that particular situation, and I think you can even talk about like Newtown in the same sense. Like I live in Connecticut, so Newtown was
Yeah.
here, and that mother in the same, if she wasn't killed by her son, knew that her son had
Mhm.
issues and still gave her son the combination to their gun safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to me is like,
and not only did she know that there were issues, but she was in communication with the biological father of the child,
yes,
who was expressing concerns about that exact thing. So, you know, it's
no, I think it's and I
Those stories kill me.
Yeah,
it's
There's so
horrible.
many of them.
yeah.
well, I lost the Sutherland Springs shooting hit really close to me. We had I have backyard chickens, and there's a Facebook group for us. It's not as active now, but members of that group were at the church when the guy went on his killing spree and didn't make it. Them and their kids. I took I had pigs for a while, and I took them to slaughter in a trailer that was built by the guest pastor that got killed that day.
Wow.
And finding out that the guy was a prohibited person, and that the Air Force, just as a policy, doesn't report, or didn't at the time report, domestic abuse allegations or convictions that were done in their like little military court to the NICS, which is the instant background check system that your name gets checked against every time you buy a gun from a gun store. And that was how he was able to acquire a gun. Was a little bit frustrating.
Mm.
And I find it increasingly frustrating sometimes when we're talking about like, oh, we need all these new laws to close these loopholes. Like, well, but you've got guys
Fix
that
the
are already
things.
getting through the system the way
Yeah.
that it was supposed to catch them.
So you're into tightening the background check, like making sure that works, and that people are doing
I
it.
think that increasing funding for NICS is not a bad idea. I think that making it faster, making it more accessible, and and I'm not necessarily in favor of universal background checks. We can talk about why, but making
Okay.
the background check system so fast and efficient that maybe I can log on and say I'm selling a gun to somebody. From my home, I can say I'm selling a gun to somebody. This is his information, and they can just spit out like an approved or denied, without giving me any more information than that about them. Like, or
I
maybe,
think a lot of the skepticism from the background check being universal from gun owners comes from the belief that if we were to do something like that, because no gun owner, no person wants a person who is going to be intentionally malicious with a firearm to have a firearm, unless they are
Right.
to an evil person.
Right.
right. In which case, it doesn't matter what what the law
Exactly.
was in the first place.
But I think a lot of the hang up from gun owners and from especially legal gun owners, I don't think illegally owned, I don't think people that prohibited persons care about this stuff because they're just going to buy a gun illegally anyway. But I think a lot of the concern comes from the war of attrition thought is that if we do universal background checks, that's going to get us one step closer. It's like, hey, let's compromise.
To like a registry or something like that.
Yes. It's like, let's compromise. I'll take a step back, you take a step forward, and then we'll meet in the middle. And like, it to gun owners.
And what are we trying to avoid? Sorry. So the registry is the thing that you're worried about?
Right.
No, not
I'm
personally,
basic on
but
this.
yeah, no, that's fine. Most gunners believe that if we do universal background checks nationwide, then that is not going to be it. It's going to keep going, and so that is why the nothing,
right.
like no compromise
and the
position
logic,
from a lot of people
yeah.
is so strong.
And the logic goes that it's like, okay, so you ban private. So universal background checks is another way of saying banning private sales. So
Right.
Universal
Good
background
point.
checks means that you cannot sell, like I can't
Right.
just go to a person and sell them a gun.
Right.
It has to go
Right.
through a gun store because
A federal license.
right,
Yeah.
they're the only ones that are licensed to do that sale.
Yes. Yes.
And so how do you enforce that? Right. You say no more private sales ever.
And then everybody's
yeah. And
getting
so
punitive around that.
well,
Yeah.
right. Okay. But so how do you enforce that? Well, you have to know who has what guns now. Right. So if you were to pass that law today and do nothing else, I could make all the private sales I ever wanted to do or buy guns privately that I wanted. And I would just, if a cop asked me about it, I'd say, no, I did this before the law, and they would have no way of knowing. So the only way to enforce that is to start keeping track of who has what guns, which means you would have to do some sort of registry of each sale from here on out and build that registry that way. And that's what people are afraid of.
And then
And
the fear
that's a
that will
privacy
inevitably,
issue.
yes. But
Yeah.
then the fear that will inevitably lead to confiscation.
Right. So once you
Because
have
you
a
need to
record
know who
of
has what
all or
guns
most
in
of
order
the
to-
guns, yeah.
Yeah. That's the fear. That's, it would take a lot of, transgressions from a government level to achieve that. Not to mention like door-to-door confiscation, which we know would never happen in this country because of the liability. Like,
But it
we
just
know
kind of
that's not going
stresses
to
people
happen.
out thinking about it.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I wish I was taking notes. I guess this is being recorded.
We can send this to you.
That's okay.
But on face value, you and everybody that you know that's like responsible gun owners don't actually have problems with universal
Right.
background check. It's
No.
everything
or no,
it's like
no
the-
more at least than we have when we have to do one when we go to a store,
right. So
Right.
it's the slippery slope and
Yes.
whatever else might
Sure.
happen. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the
And-
consensus that I've heard from most. That's
Okay.
been my experience as a gun owner, and what I've heard from most people is
Okay.
that most gun owners are normal people, and most people
Mhm.
are good people who don't want other people to get hurt. So doing things to prevent that actually work. That's the key term. Are important to us. But then the fear is that it's going to keep going.
Okay. So not to lose. Okay. There's a lot of
Yeah.
two things. One, not to lose this. Do I hear it correctly, though? I'm sorry to go back. Do I hear it correctly, though, that you would be comfortable with some, or maybe you won't because it's legal, but like something that's like a parent is liable if they knew their child was threatening their own life or someone else's life with a firearm, and that parent allowed them to have that firearm. Are you fine with that?
Me personally, yeah.
Yeah. Me personally, I can't speak for
Okay.
everybody, but
That's
that,
like
that
saying
stands to reason. Like,
yeah. That's
Okay.
like giving the
Okay.
keys to your child
if they're drunk.
Right.
knowing they're
Yeah.
drunk and
Right.
letting them go drive and drunk
Yeah.
and
Right.
kill someone.
Okay. That's great. I think that would do a lot. Right now, I think those parents, like without some sort of system for that. I mean, I don't know how it works actually, but if you called the cops and you're like, my kid, because several of them have, right? And it was too late or they didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
If the cops had some ability to take those firearms away,
Well, it doesn't even have to be the cops. It's like if you
what do they do? Yeah.
Yeah, there's some organizations, and it's actually the biggest organization, Hold My Guns, is struggling right now financially, trying to stay afloat because for some reason nobody wants to support them. But there is an organization, it's a private organization, where if you have worries about your own suicidal ideation or a family member, that you can store your guns with an FFL, not the cops. An actual federally licensed firearms dealer will store your guns and keep them, not sell them out from under you, but just keep them in their safe because there's this whole system. You may or may not know about it. There's a whole federal system for keeping inventory and keeping track of guns that dealers have. So, like there's a book that you get from the ATF.
Okay.
Or I think now they're kind of trying to digitize it, but it's a pretty secure and reliable system. So it's a lot better than just sticking your guns in a corner in the attic somewhere, or giving them to your friend who can do what the fuck ever with them once you give it to them. And this Hold My Guns organization exists to put people with those concerns in contact with FFLs that's dealers that will do this for them at no cost or at their own cost. And that's a great system, but they need money to do it. And, I can only donate so much. So I don't know. That's something to think about.
Yeah.
I have a big problem with the idea of cops taking guns, because typically what happens when cops take property is they don't give it back.
You don't get it back.
They take your money, they take your property, you just don't get it back. And this is especially true if you're somebody that they don't like, and we know that cops don't like minorities.
More so if you're somebody who doesn't have the resources to go to court and fight it and get that back.
And then the other thing that y'all said was, okay, so background checks is like, we're fine with that, but no registry because we don't want for the privacy issues. And you want private sales to continue, right? Andrew, you want private sales.
You want to be able to, at the very least, you want to be able to sell a gun to just another person without, because it costs money to do it through a gun store, because it takes their time and they have to enter it into that registry that I was talking about, that little book system that they have. They got to enter it in and they have to enter it out. So they have to stop what they're doing and take the time to do that.
Yeah.
They're going to charge you money.
How would you regulate? I mean, I know you really don't want to regulate, but what would you do to make sure that those private sales are not going to that kid or that's mentally whatever, or I don't know, or to that criminal or whatever?
Yeah, no, it's this is why we talk about root cause mitigation so much, because you get to a point where it becomes so, you get so in the weeds with trying to prevent specific problems that if you were to just start from the beginning and address the root causes of like why a kid wants to buy a gun to shoot up his school in the first place, and address that problem, that you don't necessarily have to, and this is all theoretical because we've never done it, obviously. We're not purporting
how
to
would
have...
y'all do it? How would y'all do that root cause stuff?
I mean, this is where we might agree, but this is where we differ from mainstream gun community. Is healthcare needs to be affordable and accessible for every single person in this country, and that includes mental health care. That includes proactive mental health care, and because especially men, we're not good at, like, I go to therapy, and I know a bunch of my friends who do, but like,
good for you, and it shows.
Thank you, Maryam. But that's not a norm, and especially for the at-risk demographic, which is men over 40, who are disproportionately killing themselves with their guns. Right.
And so it's like, who's committing crimes? It's men 18 to 25. Who's killing themselves? Men over 40.
Yeah.
It is such a tough, it's such a tough nut to crack, because it is such a cultural issue to dive into when we start talking about, like socialized medicine and things like that. That's a big, bad word for a lot of people, but we have a problem that we need to fix, and we cannot effectively address that problem without a large, alteration to our current healthcare system.
Yeah. And if you want to treat it legislatively, if you want to treat it punitively, it's going to have some collateral damage, because the only tools that we have to do that we already know, and we're, I'm sure that you're working on this from your end too, but we already know that law enforcement is a blunt object, even that's kind of putting it gracefully, right? Because they do discriminate. They just discriminate in the wrong way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about root causes, one of the big things I've been sort of fascinated by is what's going on with men and boys in our country. And immigration's like one of those big things. So I always I'm trying to figure out what's the root cause of there. And So men and boys have been falling behind, right? Decade after decade after decade in education, in wages and earnings. It impacts confidence. It impacts whether they get married. It impacts whether they have kids. It impacts so many things. Because the suicide thing that you're talking about is huge in Tennessee. That our number one killer is firearms, 50-year-old white men, suicide.
Wow.
And
Wow. I didn't know that.
And so I want to talk about that, and I want to look at that. Boys don't do well in school at all with girls for many, many years, and then they start to catch up. So it's like the system isn't really even geared towards them. Education's not even really geared towards them. This pushing towards 4-year college is not great for everybody, or even 2-year college is not great for everybody. I'm talking to like school directors about bringing vocational back really, really strong, so that people can get like high earning jobs that are not tied to a college degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really figuring that out as well, because I think there's a real sense of dignity loss and a real sense of like loss of place in our society. I mean, I'm talking to two guys, and I'm a woman, so that
No.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
I know,
but
I
I think that's going
No,
on.
I give you a ton of credit for having that perspective, for at least acknowledging something like that, because that's something that's huge. My wife and I had a conversation with my dad a couple of weeks ago where we laughed, where I used to have not a crazy one, but like I used to have much more of an anger issue than I do now, and my wife helped me through that because she was a sympathetic voice and was like really, we helped each other a lot with different things. And I remember talking to my dad about it, and I told him, I would just leave when I got upset. I would leave. Like I couldn't confront negative emotions like that. And he'd be like, why did you do that? And my wife and I just burst out laughing because I was like, it's in the room with me right now. And he laughed too. He's like,
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, that's what he would do when we would have tough conversations, even as an adult now. When as a married man, I would have a conversation with him.
Sure.
He'd say, no, okay, we're okay, we'll talk later. But that's a huge thing men's mental health is not great. And it has historically not been great because we've been told for years, you can't show emotions, you can't be empathetic, you can't be soft, because if you're soft, you're feminine.
This isn't
we don't want to be that. And it's,
we're not playing like the world's smallest violin for men here. I consider,
no, please no.
I consider myself a feminist. I used to consider myself, among other things, kind of like anti-feminist, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, but what I realized because I was like, oh, men have all these problems, no one's talking about it. What I realized after like actually thinking about it, reading about it, talking to learned feminists about this, is that my problems were problems with the patriarchy. My problems were the same problems that feminist women were fighting against. Just I was experiencing them differently, because I'm not a woman. And a lot of people think of the patriarchy as something that uniformly benefits men and disadvantages women. And that is a perspective. But the fact is that, as a man, if you look at society, there's a lot of ways that we shortchange ourselves. Men cling to patriarchy because it brings us a lot of social power. But, at the end of the day, we kind of view ourselves, and this is something we've done to ourselves. We kind of view ourselves as disposable. And a lot of boys internalize this, that, your value is not inherent. Your value is, what you can bring, to your family, to your partnership, what you can conquer, that like violence is an expression of masculinity because it is an expression of raw power. And these are just like really limiting ideas and really, really just something that you could really traumatize yourself by internalizing this inherent disposability.
That's powerful. One of the things, so there's this book that this researcher on men and boys came out with. So I, of course, being who I am, I listened to the podcast. didn't get a chance to read the book. And
that
he was
sounds
talking
like me.
about, and probably read a couple of articles. Just hopefully one day I'll read it again. But right now it's crazy.
Yeah, if it's an audio book, I might read it. But the Dead Tree books, I haven't been keeping up.
And you're not running for office.
and I'm on the road, so I
Yeah.
just listen. So he was saying one of the most powerful things he said in his research, or whatever research it was that this is so counter to everything, that adverse experiences, like for boys, have more of an impact as a kid than for girls. So isn't that the opposite of everything we're told, right? Like, oh, girls are sensitive, like don't shout at them, don't harm them, whatever, they don't bounce back. But actually it's boys internalize that way more than girls do. And it has a powerful impact. And I just think, wow, what if we knew that? What if we know that? And not even to be like, give boys, special attention, but just to know, like, whatever tropes we have about this stuff, it's all wrong. Everybody, is
Yeah.
experiencing these things. The other thing is just, I think what's hard for many people is like what y'all are describing, to be feminine, to be empathetic, or like have those feminine qualities, whatever, to be empathetic, to be open, to have value in and of itself, and to have masculine qualities, and to feel proud in building something, bringing something, winning something, whatever they are, and being
Yeah.
able to do that both. And I think that's what's been really hard, is like you go, it has to be one or the other. And it can't be all of it. I think it's more compelling when it is all of it, because generally I'm a single mama, so I have a ton of masculine qualities and a ton of feminine qualities. And
Sure, but we all do,
have
right?
to.
Like,
Right.
and that's why I think, I am not against saying like there are masculine things and there are feminine things, right? What I'm against is saying you as a man can only display and experience masculine things,
Right.
because we contain multitudes, and it's important for people to be able to express these things, especially when we start talking about like trans people, or like kids that are maybe trying to find their place on this like
Right.
spectrum of like gender and expression and sexuality.
Right.
It's super important to not tell them that like you're expressing the wrong kind of trait.
Can I ask you a controversial question?
Of course.
No, we don't do anything controversial on this podcast.
This might be really controversial. So it just be like, you know what? So I have had the thought that I think about, and we haven't talked about this, so maybe it's a broader question, but like, why so much more gun ownership? Why so many more guns per person? Why the numbers, right? Why the extreme numbers? And so whatever your thoughts on that. And then I started really talking to folks that are gun owners, and they started explaining to me, Andrew, this sentiment that you've shared about like protecting your family, right? And that really, really resonated with me, because it was ironic, because here I was advocating to protect my family, and here he was advocating with the exact same goal.
Yeah.
I mean, and I saw in him something I'm going to say this politically incorrect or something, but something I really value in a way is, I shouldn't use this word, but like chivalry, like this need, this desire to protect the ones he loves. And that's what I felt with my military friends back in Afghanistan. Like we would go out to a restaurant at the end of the day. For them, I mean, they were in the military, so if they could leave their weapons at home, it was a better day for them than if they had to take them out.
Yeah.
So they would be like, are we going to a private home? And we'd be like, yeah. And so they'd put it in my like closet, and they'd be like, thank God I don't have to take this thing out tonight. But if we were going to a restaurant, they probably would wear it. But what I experienced with the military guys, I mean, these were the best. They were great, but I'm sure they're all like this, but just the vigilance, right? So they're just looking at the doorway. They're they're just constantly. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. And there is a sense of protection there, a real one, like, I don't know what he's thinking about, but he's got all the doors, all the entrances, everything. He's eyeing everybody that looks somewhat shady,
Yeah.
He's got training. And, so anyways, I get it. And it does feel there is some sort of visceral sense about that. I wondered with these trends, because I'll be real with you, like, I sense is that people are caring more today than they used to 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And
maybe.
so I wondered if there's
carrying?
a psychological carrying
Okay.
their guns,
Yeah.
more than, and my sense was like, and this is just like armchair crap. So you can be like, I love you, but no, like, is there, with that degradation of the role of men, or the ability to be something in our society, of make enough money to provide, with women providing as much or whatever, is protecting in terms of physically protecting with guns. Is that a new identity?
Oh, I'm sure it's that way for a lot of guys. Yeah.
Yeah,
Really?
that's a very good question. And I know that when I first started carrying, when I first got my gun, I definitely felt that. I think every new gun owner feels this sense
like,
of,
oh, now it's my job.
now
to
I've
protect
got to be,
everyone.
I'm man cop. I've got to be, like,
Yeah, and it kind of goes away if you're like a normal person and you carry for a while.
yeah, if like you touch grass every now and then,
but yeah, no, 100%. I could totally see like a guy, his work prospects aren't what they used to be. Can't go back to school. Wife is the breadwinner. It's like, okay, what am I going to do? What do I bring to the table? Because he was raised in a traditional, yeah. Oh, it's gun. I bring gun. Yeah.
I bring gun.
It sounds so basic, and I'm embarrassed.
No. That's a very good question, because
it's a great possibility. Yeah.
I do. Sorry, Andrew.
No, I was gonna say, but I will say that if you're talking about the broad trends of increasing gun ownership, the biggest growth areas are in women, minorities, and
marginalized communities.
So that may not bear out in that sense, but I will say that probably I would say that probably there are a lot of guys out there that do think that way.
After 2020, the fastest growing demographic in new gun owners in 2020 was Black women.
Yeah.
And it's something that a lot of people, I feel, and I'm going to use the terminology, and I hate to say it, but the left, which like the
left of center in America, not like the global leftist movement.
Not the global, but it's funny because we have so many left-leaning friends who are, and far left-leaning friends who are pro-gun.
So many communist friends.
So many communist friends, but it's
because we're apparently like the only like gun page on Instagram that doesn't want to drop them out of helicopters onto the ocean or something.
Yeah. We joke, but it's like,
that's actually true.
The gun community is kind of toxic. Yeah.
If Kamala's like, I carry and I'll shoot, like that tells you that some things have shifted.
And
this is not a right issue.
I think she's only saying that because of those shifting demographics. I don't think that she really feels one way or the other about it personally, but that in and of
I don't think Kamala has to worry about protecting herself, to be honest.
But the fact that she said that, you're right, represents that at least they're aware of a big shift in demographics.
I also think that part of it is performative in the sense that she wants to appear that she's not hard
100%.
on guns. That's
100%.
In the same way that she's drinking a beer on late night talk shows because she's a normal person.
But
doesn't wear $700 belt buckles. But that's that it is a very, very good question, and I think that I tried for years to get my wife into guns. Because I wanted her to be able to protect herself. I, of course, want to be able to protect her, but she's also not attached at my hip. She's too big to put in my pocket, and she makes her own money just to do her own thing.
She's a human being.
Yeah, she's a human being. Not placing value on how much money she brings in, obviously, but because she's not a man.
No, but it's the same. My wife also, she's like totally cool with guns.
Yeah.
She's into the whole thing,
but she's not into it.
Yeah, she's not into it for her,
And I can definitely see some guys taking that on as a role. I do think, though, generally why we see, like Andrew said, why we see the number of guns increasing, which is interesting because we see overall crime rates declining. But,
right. 100%.
Yeah, I don't think they're correlated. I'm not more guns equal less crime person.
I think there's way more of a disconnect between those things than anybody on either side wants to admit.
Yes, but.
Amen.
I think you have the existing gun owners buying significantly more guns because the gun industry never does better than when a Democrat is in office.
Like guilty.
It's constant fear mongering, constant.
I mean, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. I get it.
Well, but it's also
something really fun about it.
Yeah, and now you've got people 3D printing guns, and in a lot of states where it's legal to 3D print guns, they're still counting as guns. They're serializing them and whatnot. Many are not in the states where you don't have to do that, but. The gun hobby is significantly less taboo, I think, now to a large portion of people on the political left than it has ever been.
And it's so weird because it's such a it's never been more contentious in mainstream politics, but it's never been, in my experience, more like acceptable socially, like just among like people that I talk to in real life.
I think that just
Yeah.
proves like the major disconnect between mainstream politics and middle
Yeah.
America, if you will. Your average Joe Smith.
which is exactly my campaign, because it's like
Yeah.
human beings are happy to be represented by a human being. They're very frustrated to be represented by what they know is the government or
Yeah.
a political party.
That's
Yeah.
why Trump did so well to the people who supported him, because they believed that he was not a politician. He was a person.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and then the derangement kicked in, and these people can never be convinced otherwise now. But even though now he is government. But yeah, I think people really want people that feel like they are represented by.
Yeah. I think the entertainment part of it, don't laugh at me, but my son got, you're not gonna laugh. This is so embarrassing.
We're already laughing.
My son got Nerf guns. He got like serious Nerf guns. And we played for like 45 minutes. I was like, this is very fun.
Yeah,
It is a lot
very,
of fun.
very fun.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of
This
fun.
is very fun. And I was like, maybe I understand things a little bit better
Yeah.
right now, because this is very fun. And I can understand people be like, do not take this fun away from me. You know, like
yeah.
I want to go do this.
No,
Yeah.
no.
No,
15 more
that
minutes.
is definitely part of it. Like,
Yeah.
Because it's, I'm into guns for protecting myself and my family. That's why I got into it in the first place. But also, it's just given me such joy to like shoot guns. And
Have you ever shot a gold-plated machine gun in the desert with your friends?
Yeah, like it's insane. I mean, it's just insanely fun. And
Yeah.
if you like, you see, like car guys, right? Like that, like buy
Yeah,
cars,
yeah.
but they'll buy
The
fixer-upper
lighting.
cars, and they'll get like parts
Yeah.
in there. And yeah, I mean, it's the same way with guns. Like
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
working on clocks,
And it's not
I
inherently
finally
tied to
understood.
like any sort of like male phallic imagery, like that people constantly try to say like, oh, you're
No.
insignificant and you bought a gun kind of thing. It's
I
It-
felt none of that. I just had a great time. And I was trying to
Yeah.
I was trying to be accurate in my shooting, and I was awful at it. And that also was fun to try to get better at that.
Yeah.
And it was very satisfying when I finally got him. He's in the kitchen hiding under the counter, and I'm in behind the couch, and we're just trying to, and it was all very, it gave you, it was really fun. So I was like, maybe I understand this a little bit.
Have you ever
not
shot
to
a gun?
denigrate.
No.
No, not at all.
Maybe I shouldn't say this, because if my enemies want to come shoot me up, they know that I don't have a gun. I don't shoot guns. I've never shot a gun. So
Well, if we get to the point where that's a concern, then we've got a boatload of other issues to worry about.
well,
but-
I know. I just so the way I got all into this is January. There was midnight, January of 2023. So before the Covenant shooting, which was in March, and Auden, it has a fever, and it's 12 o'clock at night, and it's just me and him in the house, as it always is. And so it's midnight, and I'm dealing with his fever, and he's kind of dozing off to sleep, and then I hear like pop, 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 and that pop, pop, pop. That sound. Well, maybe actually a lot of people don't know that sound, but I knew it, and I was like, oh. And I go out, and there's just a bunch of dudes running through our parking lot, young guys, and I live in like a townhome area, so it's a parking lot, and I'm like, okay. And then I'm just following them, watching them, seeing where they're going. And then eventually the cops come. And that was the time where I was like, okay, so what happens to us in this scenario? And I imagine that is the moment whereby many people become gun owners right
Yeah.
there.
I've
Like,
had
that's the
conversations that go that way.
That's the moment. And I didn't choose that. But I get it, like I don't, it's just glass windows on my first floor and a
Yeah.
door.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and so anyways, it's a real thing. I get it. And, but no, I have not.
Well,
I'm
if
not
you're ever
sure
in
I can.
Connecticut or Texas, you should reach out to one of us, and we'll definitely take you shooting if you're interested.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey friends, we hope you like the show. We like doing it. It gives us a sense of validation and the feeling that our lives will not be forgotten after our bones are dust and time has moved on. But anyway, if you like it, the best way that you can show that support is going on our Patreon and becoming a supporter there. When you become a patron, you get access to all of these sweet perks that come with it, like exclusive merch, discount codes, bonus content, and even access to our super secret Discord server.
Plus, we'd appreciate it. Money buys our love, and we are cheap dates. So anyway, go to patreon.com/abetterway2a if you want to. This isn't in order, and even if it was, or just a bodiless voice on the internet, or click the link in the show notes to check it out. But yeah, no, you actually mentioned something we wanted to touch on. One of the reasons we've seen a lot of people on the who tend to lean left is because purchasing guns for the first time is because of this rise in far right, like Christian nationalism, anti-gay,
like
anti-trans rhetoric. Exactly. Like I said before, equating all trans people to pedophiles and.
You would be amazed by how much of our audience, at least our vocal audience, is trans women.
Yeah, just trans people in general. But
yeah,
that's
they're targeted in very serious
100%
ways.
And we saw after the Covenant shooting. You made headlines for your efforts after the Covenant shooting, which obviously we empathize with because it's a very emotional situation and terrible. But we also saw that conservative pro-gun people, who typically pro-gun, but definitely conservative people, were also calling for the disarmament of trans people because they saw that shooter and immediately used that.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, right.
And immediately used that as ammunition to say, these people should not own guns.
These people should not be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, in Tennessee, it's these people.
Exactly.
Well, right.
Be.
But so
Exactly.
that's the end of their thought process. But right now, in a mainstream political sense, they've latched onto this idea that, because everybody's talking about mental illness and should the mentally ill own guns. And then, if they can sell you on the idea that a trans person is inherently mentally ill.
They love, that's why they release those journals. The parents they've been fighting that for a year and a half, and they finally released them illegally.
Yeah, I know. Well, and that's the thing is, like when you buy a gun from a gun store, you fill out your form, and one of the questions on there says, have you ever been involuntarily admitted to a mental hospital? Because that would make you a prohibited person to purchase a firearm. They're equating someone being trans as essentially self-admittal that they are not fit to carry and own guns. And obviously we see that as problematic because we know plenty of there's an overlap, like with any demographic. There's an overlap of white men and mental illness. There's you can name it.
Okay, so my understanding is the mental illness is gender dysphoria. And being trans is not an illness, that's an identity.
No, but to them,
but that's
a lot
a
of
diagnosis.
Right, or a diagnosis,
not an illness.
Not an illness. You're right.
No,
you're right.
no.
I misspeak a lot. I am but a simple cis man. But so it's like, but to treat the dysphoria, you embrace the identity. Is the way that I understand it, like medically.
Right.
Right.
But to a lot of these fundamentalists, being trans is a sickness, and they don't care about the medical side of it. It's they're wrong, and it's the same thing that we saw with metal music in the 80s, and they're a Satanist, and we have to protect the kids. That's a big one. Like it's always about the kids, regardless of whether it's actually about the kids, because then we could have a much more serious conversation about gun control if it was. But obviously, do you see especially with more marginalized people getting armed for the first time, do you see an overlap where increasing efforts for gun control could disproportionately affect their ability to protect themselves?
Well, given that I'm in Tennessee, what I see right now is my agenda. And I know we've talked about what's wrong with the legality approach to this. So, whether I need to think deeply about this post conversation and figure that out, because I appreciate that. The two things I said I wanted to do was background checks and safe storage. Now you're saying a background check would mess things up for trans people that are trans. It could.
So theoretically, the logic might go, universal background checks. Everyone needs a background check. Donald Trump is president, and the far right takes over, and all of a sudden, trans people fail the background check.
Yeah. What I was saying, the connection there is when you fill out the paperwork, only if you've ever been involuntarily committed do you have to check yes. So having like I have anxiety and ADHD. I don't have to check yes because I've never been involuntarily admitted. So having gender dysphoria does not immediately make you unqualified to own a gun. But they equate that. Like the people that are transphobic.
And they could theoretically, you know, if the far right was a monolithic federal and state government, you know, they could definitely make it to where that is a disqualified.
Make it very difficult.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think if that's the case, we got 99 problems, you know, and this is one of them.
Yeah,
you know,
but you don't want to lay the groundwork now for a potential abuse of power later. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth thinking about. It's like, you know, when we were thinking about ERPOs and people being able to take, you know, guns away if they're having crises or whatever, and then the Black community was like, "Yo, they're going to be knocking down our doors before anybody else's doors." And
guess what? So where they did do that, that did happen.
Yeah, we've got to rethink this. I didn't think of safe storage or background checks as being like a big, you know, restriction on anybody's rights or anything. But if there's a dictatorship fascism movement in this country that gets power, I mean, there's so many things.
That we're going to have to worry about.
Yeah.
And we don't want to get sucked into a slippery slope fallacy either, because after a certain point, it's like, okay, let's not do anything because
don't do anything because it might ruin everything.
Well, that's the thing, you know, it's like, I still kind of want the background checks. I hear what you're saying. Like, you as people are like, we don't trust you. We don't trust you to just do that.
But if we can build trust, and if background checks are implemented, you know, I don't necessarily have a solution, but you know, I don't know everything. And you know, maybe
that's
someday,
the thing. Like, what if it's a conversation and gun owners inform that conversation?
That's honestly what's not happening. That's why there's so much frustration. We hear these laws. And
I hear it. I get it. I got
it. To us, like we're little people, obviously. Like we're not in politics and whatnot.
I'm just a little baby.
I'm a little baby. We'll gun on it. But the fact that like one of the reasons we brought you on here, was because like we can have this what was that?
The lighting.
The lighting is just nuts. It's like I'm like in the moon
blown out
right
by
now.
the sun.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. We appreciate your activist background. We feel like we have a lot of common ground with your platform. And you seem like somebody that's coming to this in good faith and not like one of these like lizard people politicians that's just doing it because they've been doing it forever.
Yeah, I mean, an activist background is very recent, right? That all started basically at Covenant. I mean, I always have a pretty thick backbone when it comes to like right and wrong and justice and stuff like that. That's driven my whole life. But coming out and being like, I'm planning a rally, that's pretty recent. And I consider myself a pretty measured person. And yeah, like I have had to hear so many new perspectives, and sometimes I'm like, Maryam, you're kind of listening to everybody. So what is it going to be? You know what I mean? I want to be careful not to make false promises or like build expectations.
No, of course.
But I mean, I get that I've not been in Congress and I don't know what it's like, but like what I was just thinking, it was like, you know, if there's a hearing or if there's a conversation at the congressional level for a background check, primarily, I think that's the one y'all are most concerned about. Safe storage doesn't seem as big of a deal. Like, what if we had folks like you speaking to it? And I get that can be politicking.
If they'll let us.
Look, we have gun owners that are supporting, you know, but in a meaningful way where it's like, because that's what I picked up at some point in this conversation, Jordan, you were saying something and I was like, I think I finally get it. It's like when you were saying when you buy a gun, XYZ happens. And I was like, I don't actually know because I've never bought a gun.
Yeah.
And you're like, case in point.
That's not your fault. You wouldn't know that if you never.
No, but it's like case in point. Why are you legislating a thing that you're not even freaking involved in?
Well, and that's a lot of where we lack I think the insight that would actually make meaningful change into whatever legislation ends up passing. Yeah,
and everything.
100%. You've got it's, you know, I've done I've gone up to the Capitol and testified against gun control bills in Connecticut, but I'm surrounded in by a sea of don't tread on me, hardline
and that's
Republican.
not you. Yeah.
No, and it's really hard, and it's really hard to feel like people are actually listening, to while you're saying like, listen, guys, like we all want the same thing. At the end of the day, we want people to be safe. We want kids to stop dying in their schools. I hate that. I have a 2-year-old. I hate that when we put her into daycare at 3 months, my first thought was those doors are not bulletproof. I fucking hate that.
I think
terrible.
about it all the time.
Yeah,
I think about all of it all the time.
And
we had you remember we had a scare where I don't want to give away too much information because I don't want anybody fucking geolocating my kid's school, but a school nearby my kid's school had what ended up being a hoax. A guy called in and was like, I'm gonna shoot up the school and there's bombs everywhere. And my wife called me and was like, and at this point we only had one car. So I was at work in the car. My wife was at home with the baby and she was freaking out. She's like, can you please just I don't know what's going on over there. Can you just go
get her?
And, and so I went to my son's school. They were on lockdown there because, nobody knew what was going on. If there was somebody there, it was real close and they could just walk over. So I just waited out there, and I had my gun on me and I just waited outside and just watched. And eventually it turned out to be a hoax and, that was good. But it's something that it's like, even in that situation, like your heart is pounding,
Well, I was going to say, what would you do if it was an AR-15, Andrew?
Do my best.
Yeah.
I would try.
So, I mean, I'll be honest. When I pick up my daughter at daycare, I carry into it. There's no signage that says I can't. And so I take full liberty whenever I can to carry because to me, if I were to go shoot up a school, I would do it right before all the parents got there because everyone's going to be there. And so are the parents. And that's, if I'm an evil person, I'm going to get as many people as possible. That's so I carry when I go and pick up my daughter. And I know a lot of gun owners, I'm not saying me specifically, but I know a lot of gun owners when they see a sign who are otherwise responsible gun owners. And I use that term, not law abiding, because they will see a sign that says you can't carry here. And they will reason in their head and say, well, I value my personal protection and the protection of my family who's with me more than I value the repercussions that could possibly happen if I'm caught. Like in a movie theater after the Aurora shooting, I know tons of gun owners that were carrying in movie theaters, even though there was signage that said that you couldn't, with no ill intent, just for protection, because they knew that sign did not stop a mass shooter. And this actually brings me to a question that a patron brought up, super seamless right here, especially with what we were talking about. We give patrons the opportunity to ask questions, and the gentleman Mark Davis asked, would you be willing to work with politicians from across the aisle to implement solutions to violence that don't involve new gun control laws? For example, securing funding to station armed guards at schools to protect from mass shooters in lieu of an assault weapons or magazine ban.
Okay, here I go. I am not convinced yet that an armed guard would do the thing.
I actually feel the same way. Just
fair. Well, Uvalde screwed that up for a lot of people.
Proved it. But other cases have too. Other school shootings have too.
Yeah, it's like it could go either way with one armed guard for the whole school. You have no idea. And even if I'm taking your answer. Well, you answer first, and then I'll fucking. Well, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Answer. It's great for you to answer. Well, so the other thing is there's a dearth, there's a lack. So then you've got a fairly, very, very, very no disrespect meant, retired, whatever doing it, and I don't know how those reflexes are. I understand from my military friends and from the study I've done that to get an AR-15, you got to have some daily kind of training.
That's not true.
That's not true. Okay. And then here's my other thing. So Covenant was an excellent example of our police force doing an incredible job.
They were good.
Incredible job.
Yeah.
I make it a hobby to be critical of police, and they were very
same. I'm not going to give that love easily, but they did an incredible job, and they were geared for it. They knew exactly what they were doing for that instance, and so the communication, the disarmament, quick, it was top notch. But they have said we have trained for this we're geared for this. we're prepared for this level of, and it was like 8 dudes at least. I mean, men or women, I don't know, but 8 people at least ready to go disarm this one 18-year-old with this AR.
And so,
And
the training that they're talking about, it's not technical training; it's psychological training. The response, and this is proven. It's proven in theory and in practice that the way to respond to any mass shooter, any active mass shooter, is any responding resources go straight to where they hear the shooting, regardless of if they have backup or what equipment they have, and engage the shooter immediately. So it doesn't matter if you've got a pistol, a club, mace, or a rocket launcher, like whatever you've got, you go in and you engage the shooter. Statistically speaking, that is what reduces casualties at mass shooting events.
I mean, that makes sense.
Well, that's from the police.
That's from a top-down statistical kind of look at it.
That makes sense. And then psychologically, do you feel tough enough to do that?
And so
that's really a question that most people will never have an answer to.
Well, and that's what
and they didn't feel good. Right. They didn't feel safe going in there.
300 of them didn't feel safe.
And they had just completed ostensibly training for that kind of event, but it didn't it didn't plant the seed in their mind that,
No. But also, even if you're psychologically situated to do that and you've got whatever rounds coming at you, you still can be a victim to it.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you're gonna maybe absorb that.
Right. And then
so
the
that
next guy
go
through
elsewhere.
the door has a better chance.
Exactly. Yeah.
And cops hate it when you point it out to them, but that's kind of your fucking job. A lot of cops are like,
I hate it for him. I hate it for him.
I'm just trying to get home at the end of the day. I'm like, why? You signed up to be a cop.
Well, but I mean, did they sign up to get AR-15 blasted at them?
Yeah, no. I mean, it makes sense to you have a.
I'm kind of being.
Your job doesn't supersede. I know. Your job doesn't supersede survival instincts and your desire to get home to your family for sure.
I'm being difficult.
I don't run into fires like without my gear on because I just want gotta do it. I signed up for.
Well, that's because studies show that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. Yeah, I'm going to be the fireman.
Thanks for doing that, though. I just want to say that I have not heard one word from my child in over an hour. So he's on a screen, right? It's probably a video game. Y'all aren't there yet, but
not yet.
No,
I should get to him.
Okay.
All right,
this is something that we could easily talk about for hours. I'm sure
6 hours minimum.
I'm glad we got to one of the Patreon questions, but this I think this was a very enlightening
same
episode. I respect you immensely for coming on to a self-proclaimed gun podcast without any...
I was like reading history until I got on here. I was like, okay, let me remember what was happening with the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and the decision. Literally, because I geeked out about all that.
Our concerns are a little more cultural a lot of the time.
Or practical and whatnot. But no, it's I respect you immensely for coming on here and talking about this. I know it's a vulnerable position to be in, especially running for office, knowing that you're going to be questioned about your stance on guns and practicality of policies and whatnot. So we appreciate you for coming on. And I think, if anything, people who are on the fence in your district about voting for you, at least this will show them that you're open to new information and open to
she's not a tyrant, guys. She has concerns.
That was the thing. It was like, you were an activist first, you did good work overseas and whatnot, and then you became a politician. It's not like you were bred into this by big money and
one of the dynasties.
Parents were politicians and things like that. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you, because I think that it's for people who wanting to get into politics, I feel like they feel very disadvantaged.
Oh my God.
They don't feel like they can. It's not going to do anything. Like but here you are doing that, and I hope you win over the other guy. To be honest, even if you are not,
guy sounds
even if you're not going to go shooting with me anytime soon, but the other guy sounds like a.
I don't know how negative you're allowed to go on this podcast, but I don't think.
I don't think Christmas card with. He had a Christmas card with AR-15.
Wait, was that the guy?
No.
His family?
No. You're thinking of Massey, I think.
Oh, okay. Wait, Governor.
Look up Andy Ogel's Christmas card.
Andy Ogel
Just
Christmas
Google it right now.
We're gonna
Right.
Google it.
He's the one.
We're gonna Google it.
His 3 kids, his wife, and him all have AR-15 in front of their Christmas
How do you
tree.
how do you spell his last name?
Aogles.
Oh, not the one I was thinking about, but
Oh, okay.
yes. So here's the thing. Like, I don't have a problem with this, but it's weird
Right.
to make it your personality. Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, it's weird to put it on a Christmas card.
Like
I
I'm
don't have
thinking-
anything wrong with
Like,
like
listen, I'm
capable
thinking about
kids.
guns all day.
Yeah.
I'm
I know.
immersed in the culture. I would not do this.
I know.
I would not do this.
But
I would not take
no.
this picture.
That's just it to me. That's like Hillary Clinton saying that she puts hot sauce in her purse.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
meant to send a message.
There's nothing
you
wrong
know?
with it, but when you do that, I can already tell like this is performative. Like you're not
Yes,
like you
it's
don't
not
know
real.
what these
But it's
things
also,
are.
and it's also like weird. It's like
so weird.
anything,
It's definitely weird.
anything that eclipses your world. I mean, I hear you, Andrew. You love this is your thing,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But you have a family. Like you also seem to have some internal, like, okay, this is too much. I need to move
I do
on
have
and
a
do
whole
something
life.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, I need to stop obsessing about this.
Yeah,
Or I need,
yeah.
you know,
sure.
and like we can all have things that we, you know, people are obsessed with football, and then it's like go, you know, touch some grass, like you
Yeah.
said.
yeah.
Yeah,
But-
in the autistic community, we call this a special interest.
Right.
Yeah.
But we all need to go touch grass, and
Yes.
it's like no. But yeah, you're right. It was a signal. Unfortunately, it was 3 months before the Covenant shooting, so it tanked him in a lot of ways
Yeah.
because people were like,
Yeah. And you know, like I
Anyhow.
don't think video games cause violence. I don't think gun pictures
Right.
cause violence, but still
Right.
not it's
Right.
not a great look regardless of what side you're on.
"No, we want a
Um,
human being."
yeah.
And
But no, we super appreciate you for coming on.
I learned a
think
lot.
this is
I learned
great.
a lot, guys. This was helpful, but it's the tip. I didn't learn everything, and I feel
No.
like these conversations need to happen more.
Absolutely. We are totally open for having more conversations in the future if you are and
And
I
if
hope
somebody
you
from
continue and-
from the police union is listening to this, I want to point out that I criticized police and Maryam pushed back against it. Please don't.
Yeah.
Please don't let my comment.
I'm gonna say, I always saw myself as an outsider. Always saw myself as an independent person versus all the trends. So I'm just gonna say the thing as I see it, and whether that gets me elected or reelected is just that.
Wow, what a
sucks.
weird
It is
idea.
weird.
I can't. Never heard that from a.
I know,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people say that, and I'm sure
No,
it
no,
changes
I
once
know.
you get up there because you want to do the things and you get into it, whatever. So I'm not acting like I'm naive to all that, but
Yeah.
But yeah.
We have one more question for you and then I promise to let you
Okay.
go. It's a quick
Okay.
one. If you had one piece of advice for people listening, what would it be?
This does not have to be related to anything we talked about. It could be very simple,
Sure.
just quality of life.
something I'm using a lot. Maybe this is not that helpful. I don't know. Well, something I'm using a lot in this campaign and in the world today very much. I think y'all's podcast is this too, is if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And I think that, American culture supposedly is like the bootstrap culture, the like innovator, like figure it out for yourself. And a lot of people take a lot of pride in that. But there is also this sense of powerlessness that a lot of people have been feeling and feel. And that's why like people don't vote. Tennessee has the lowest voter turnout. Just generally like screw the government, screw the corporations. Like we're all just, and I think that that's not healthy for society. I don't think that's healthy for human beings to feel that powerless. I think that is where the root of a lot of things come from, And so I would welcome everyone to challenge themselves whenever they feel a door closed externally to them and they have someone they want to blame for that or something they want to blame for that, to look inside and just be like, what way can I make through this? And my campaign is geared for me to lose. But, just 2 nights ago, we learned that we're one of 9 races that have moved it left a little bit.
Wow.
So it's safe. It was safe Republican, and now it's likely Republican. I know that seems like a silly thing to celebrate, but that's a big shift.
That's absolutely.
That's a big shift. And if I listen to anybody, I mean, I can't tell you how many OG donors, Dem donors, all kinds of folks, not even on the right, but on the left, were like, this is a lost cause. I would wither. Life is not meant to just buckle under the pressures of all the external factors that are around us. And there are many, depending on who you are and whatever. So I guess I would just say, like, we've got to continue to believe in our self-worth and our power. And maybe it doesn't come in the ways that we think it should come. and maybe it doesn't come as fast as we think it will. But I think that once you stop believing that, you've given it all away.
No,
And so I want everyone to like take that with themselves in terms of what we're facing politically in this country.
I love that. And you know, the work that we do on the podcast, not to make it about me, but the work that we do on the podcast sometimes feels like, rolling a boulder up a hill. But I really feel like kind of in the same vein as what you're saying. It's just like if somebody remembers something that we said and it changes their mind about something, then it was worth it.
Exactly. You don't know what seeds you're planting. You never know what seeds you're planting. And you find out years and years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
Awesome.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Can't believe we did 2 hours.
I know.
We were gonna get.
I know.
We get there. We've had longer episodes than that, just depending.
I can imagine. I can see it. Yeah, you guys are curious, and you're in therapy. So,
Yeah. It's a win. It's a win.